On May 3rd, 2004, 21-year-old Raashed Hall and his pregnant girlfriend Ashley visited George's Carryout, a walk-up shop then located at 5120 Burroughs Avenue Northeast. The couple was approached by several teens and a confrontation ensued. They mocked Hall's clothing as they took a hammer from his girlfriend, which she retrieved from their vehicle in an attempt to intervene or assist the 21-year-old. The opposing group then used the hammer to bust the windows of the red Mercury Sable that Hall had been driving. The couple quickly fled the scene, and as they did, someone from the group that had been involved in the altercation fired at the vehicle several times. Raashed called his older brother Ricardo and told him that he'd been jumped by several unknown individuals who had broken the windows out of a car that he was driving and also discharged at the car. Raashed asked his brother to meet him and, quote, bring a hammer, which Ricardo understood to be a firearm. That same evening, 8-year-old Chelsea Cromartie, her mother and younger brother were visiting her aunt and decided to watch TV in the living room. Instead of returning to Raashed's nearby apartment, the brothers, who were armed, went looking for revenge. As they drove through the neighborhood, Raashed spotted one of his assailants sitting on the porch of a home in the 800 block of 52nd Street Northeast with another individual later identified as Chelsea's cousin. The Hall brothers circled the block a few more times, and the final time, Raashed leaned across his brother, who was driving, and fired several discharges. Neither teen on the porch was injured. However, sadly, Chelsea and her aunt, Darlene Taper, had been hit as the discharges pierced the living room wall. Taper was wounded in the shoulder and ultimately survived, while Chelsea was hit in her head by a discharge which allegedly penetrated her brain. Heartbreakingly, within an hour of the incident, she was pronounced gone. Darlene's 2 children were unharmed, as were Chelsea's mother and 5-year-old brother. Police canvassed the neighborhood for days, knocking on doors, distributing flyers, and had even set up roadblocks periodically. Early on, they were able to determine that the incident which claimed Chelsea's life was connected to the dispute at George's Carryout earlier the evening. There was one problem though. Investigators were at a loss for a suspect, which was frustrating for them as a reward of up to $75,000 was being offered. Investigators turned to the public for help in finding a red, quote, Ford Taurus-style car that they said appeared connected to the incident. The Mercury was found in Capitol Heights with its windows smashed the day after Chelsea lost her life. An officer had it impounded, and the owner was notified in a letter that his vehicle was being held in Prince George's County. The owner was later identified as a relative of Hall's. As days continued to pass with no arrests, the frustration grew, resulting in a homegoing service filled with both anger and sadness. On May 8, 2004, a few blocks from where Chelsea lost her life and steps from the Carryout restaurant where the dispute began, many people lined up outside Holy Christian Missionary Baptist Church to pay their final respects. Hundreds, including many children, turned up and viewed the body of the 8-year-old, who had a white linen doily draped over her hands, a tiara across her forehead, and her familiar smile in place. Poetry, worship and praise songs, and a whole lot of reminiscing took place. In a heart-shattering moment, Chelsea's mother lunged at her daughter's coffin in the closing minutes of the service. The anger was provoked or brought to the surface as speaker after speaker called upon the community to bring the assailants to justice and to stop the city's cycles of violence. As the investigation continued, detectives learned that as many as 10 people took part in the initial dispute. In a city where police had previously stated that they often had difficulty locating witnesses, officials received countless calls, including some that provided key pieces of the puzzle. Tips were provided to law enforcement, but would justice be served? A police spokesperson shared that investigators had been talking to Raashed Hall during the preceding days and ultimately set up the meeting on May 9th, where he voluntarily responded to the Metropolitan Police Department and was arrested. He gave detectives a videotaped statement describing how his brother lowered the driver's side window and he'd fired the discharges, while Ricardo gave a videotape account as well and told police where to find the firearm. The brothers were charged with first-degree fatality while armed. According to court documents, Ricardo told police he discarded the firearm used in the incident in a wooded area in Montgomery County and sold the car he was driving that night after it was identified in a news media report. The then 23-year-old also shared that it was a 9mm semi-auto which he got from an associate. He told investigators that he thought the plan was to locate the individuals, confront them and scare them, and discharging in the air. Following their arrest, it was obvious that the brothers weren't the typical fatality suspects. Both were graduates of DC high schools and worked steady jobs, and neither had been previously arrested for a violent offense. They were valued by their employers and made favorable impression in the neighborhood where they grew up. Quickly after being charged, they admitted their roles and furthermore were ready to plead guilty early on. Court documents revealed that police were led to the brothers by a witness who was present at the neighborhood Carryout restaurant. Additionally, documents stated that the witness and another teenager from the Carryout were standing on the porch of Chelsea's aunt's home when the discharges were fired in their direction from a vehicle that had stopped across the street. Records showed that Raashed Hall had been awaiting trial in DC Superior Court on an illegal substance charge at the time of the incident. One night, less than 2 months prior, police spotted the man backing up a vehicle with no lights on and traveling on the wrong side of a street in Southeast Washington. When they stopped him, they claimed he got out of the vehicle and started yelling at them. Ultimately, they allegedly found 11 grams of Mary in the vehicle, and Hall was arrested for reckless driving and possession of Mary with intent to distribute. It was the first time that either brother faced a criminal charge. At the time of their arrest, Raashed, who graduated from Woodson Senior High School in 1999, was employed as a glass mechanic for Columbia Mirror and Glass of Georgetown, Inc. for more than 3 years. Ricardo, who graduated in 1998 from Phelps Career Senior High School, was employed as a maintenance worker for the prior 2.5 years. Their father, Ricardo McKeithon, went to the Cromartie family to apologize. In August 2004, Raashed pleaded guilty to second-degree fatality and assault with a dangerous weapon. As part of the plea, the prosecution and defense agreed not to ask the judge to depart from the court's voluntary sentencing guidelines, which called for 12 to 24 years for the fatality charge and up to 5 years for the assault charge. In court, Raashed spoke of the humiliation he felt in front of his girlfriend and the fury it set off in him. He described his feelings as being in an uproar, leading him to call his brother Ricardo and further escalate what took place. Ricardo also pleaded guilty. On January 14, 2005, dressed in an orange jail jumpsuit in DC Superior Court, Raashed mostly faced the judge. However, his words were directed to Chelsea's family. The man shared that he dreamt of the 8-year-old often and remained haunted by his actions. Reading from a piece of yellow paper, quote, "A beautiful child lost her life," he said. Hall told Chelsea's family that he hoped they would forgive him someday and that he did not mean to do this to anyone, especially not their precious little girl. Tears filled the eyes of many who were there to witness. Ultimately, Raashed was sentenced to 23 years in prison, 21 years for second-degree fatality while armed, and an additional 2 years for an assault with a dangerous weapon offense due to Taper's injuries. To be clear, that's 23 years in total. Following the sentencing, Chelsea's father, Daniel Cromartie, expressed disappointment as under DC law, Hall faced up to 50 years in prison. The man's wife, Takesha, just sobbed as the pair boarded an elevator surrounded by friends and relatives. Raashed's 23 years was a few decades shy of the figure the Cromarties thought he deserved, so they didn't attend Ricardo's sentencing because they didn't want to go through the disappointment twice. Ultimately, Ricardo was sentenced to 20 years for second-degree fatality while armed. On February 18, 2005, McKeithen filed a civil suit against Assistant U.S. Attorney Charles Carr. In the filing, he blamed the prosecutor for withholding very critical, crucial, and factual evidence that would have completely changed the outcome of his son's cases. As for the gang of teens at the restaurant, people in the neighborhood put their ages at between 15 and 18 and cited the Merritt Elementary School playground and George's restaurant as their favorite spots to congregate. Based on my research, I was not able to find any information regarding any of the teens having ever been convicted regarding either incident. The brothers and their father, Ricardo McKeithen, believed that if their case hadn't been so prominent, things would have turned out differently. During a phone interview from Rivers Correctional Institution, Raashed said police were so satisfied with pleasing everybody and pleasing the public by arresting them that locking up the other guys was the furthest thing from their minds. After serving almost 2 decades, specifically 17 years in prison, Raashed Hall returned to the spotlight, but this time in a positive way. A new invention he designed while incarcerated. The device Hall patented uses blocks and adjustable resistance bands to make push-ups more of an intense exercise. Months after his release, Raashed was selected to become a fellow in the Georgetown Pivot Program in Washington, D.C.
Once I began to have that support and people actually start believing in me and believing in the idea, I said, no, this is really a workable thing.
Down, up, down.
Raashed Hall calls this his power push-up.
Everybody knows how to do a traditional push-up. However, my device adds resistance. Once I became settled down and focused, I told myself that I'm going to do everything possibly that I can to better myself.
Hall started his patent process while inside using whatever materials he could find. Now he has 3 working model prototypes.
I feel reborn. I feel regenerated. I always said, this is who I am. My circumstance doesn't define me. I am an inventor. I am a trainer.
May the family and friends of Chelsea Cromartie find solace in the happy memories, and may her soul rest in perpetual peace. Thank you.